Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, actually a Photography 101 episode, and we're going to talk about the concept of white balance. Now, if you're new to photography, you probably have heard the term white balance, but you may not know what it means. And basically what it means is, if you look at something white, the camera interprets it as white, and when you look at a picture of it, it is white. It's not blue or yellow or some other color. So that's really important for a lot of things. For instance, skin tones, so they look natural. But I'm sure if you're like most of us, you've taken indoor pictures without a flash, and your pictures came out really kind of orange and yellow and not natural looking. Well, that's because your white balance was not set correctly. So we're going to take a look at a little graphic here. This is not my graphic. If I can find it, there it is. And this is actually off the internet, so I thank whoever made it. But often when you look at your camera, no matter what kind of camera you have, you're going to see something that looks like this. AWB is auto white balance, where your camera automatically figures out what the white balance should be, and that's the default. And in many instances, but certainly not all, that's all you need. However, you have other settings too. For instance, if you're looking at something like tungsten lighting, which tends to be more yellow than sunlight or like white light, the camera is going to add blues to it. And if you look at something like shade, which has a lot of blue tones to it, the camera is going to automatically add yellows and reds and those types of colors to it. Now, the one thing that you don't see on this graphic is a custom setting. So all cameras, from this professional Nikon camera to this inexpensive Sony camera, will allow you to set white balance one way or another. And as far as I know, just about every camera, except maybe the junkiest camera out there, will let you set white balance manually. Now that's different from camera to camera, so you're going to have to read your manual. And if you don't have a manual, you can just download one off the internet. But on this particular camera, for instance, white balance is so important that it has a dedicated button. And so what I would do is I would press the white balance button, I'd rotate my dial back here until I saw something that said pre or adjustment or something. I'd press the button again, and then I would be able to take either a calibrated gray card if I was really professional, or just a piece of white paper, and hit the shutter release and set my white balance manually. Now that's really important when you're in situations where you don't have pure light, like from one source. So maybe you're going to be in a setting where you're in a church, for instance, and there's all this light coming in through stained glass, and you have maybe some fluorescent lights in there and some spotlights in there and some candlelight. So using a way to set your white balance manually can really save you a lot of grief in post-production. Now, cameras like this Nikon here, they're just obsessed with white balance. So even all those custom settings, you can tweak those. You can tweak your setting that you do manually. And this one will also let you set white balance by what's called color temperature, or Kelvin. So Kelvin is a temperature scale, and so sunlight has a color temperature, I think, of about 5,500. Candlelight, which is very yellow, for instance, has a color temperature of 2,000 Kelvin, and something like maybe shade, really bluish shade, might have a color temperature of maybe 7,000 Kelvin. So professionals will actually go in there and set the color temperature if they really want to get their own control over that white balance. So there's many ways to do it. Of course, you're not going to see that with a little camera like this, but you will be able to manually set your white balance in here. So let's take a look at why that's important. So I'm going to bring up some graphics here and go to the right spot. And so this first scene here is a scene of a house that I chose just because it had some white on it. And this is using the auto white balance setting. And in this sunny situation, blue sky situation, actually the auto white balance did an absolutely fine job, and the whites look white. Now the next scene is I'm forcing the camera into the fluorescent setting. And when you're in a fluorescent setting, what the camera is going to do is it's going to think that the light is a little bit too yellow, and it's going to add blue or violet. And so we can see that in this picture here, which is much bluer and unnatural looking. Well, now let me go in the opposite direction, and I'm going to set the camera to shade mode. Remember, shade has a lot of blue tones in it, so the way the camera will compensate is by adding colors from the opposite side of the spectrum, in other words, reds and yellows. And that's what we have here. Again, not natural looking. Well, what about skin tones? Well, here's my daughter, who is always so kind to help me with these little projects. And here the camera is set in auto setting. And I'm in a room where she's being lit by fluorescent lights and also outdoor light coming from a window. And it doesn't do too bad of a job. If I force it into tungsten, it's a little blue, but it still looks pretty good. Now, if I go into fluorescent, it seems like it's adding a lot of red and blue tones to it, so it's starting to look unnatural. Now that if I move into like regular bright light or sunlight, it's compensating by adding a lot of yellow because it thinks that it needs to do that. If I go to flash, more yellow, cloudy, which is a lot of blue in it, about the same amount of yellow as flash, I think. But if I go to shade, which has a real lot of blue in it, it's adding a lot of yellow and red tones and all sorts of other stuff. So very unnatural. And this is here where I set the white balance manually, just using a piece of copy paper. So I kind of used that method that I just talked about, and I think this one looks the best of all. Although the automatic, again, did a pretty good job. So let me get out of this graphic here and just kind of sum up. So white balance is really important. Virtually every camera, even the cheap webcam that I'm using right now to record this, will allow you to adjust white balance. In most cases, auto white balance works just fine. But if you're in a situation where the pictures just don't look right, then try one of the manual settings. If that still doesn't work for you, or if you're in a difficult lighting situation, let's say like a church, then what you're going to want to do is customize your white balance. And you can use a piece of white paper. If you're really professional, you can use a calibrated gray card, but either one will give you much better results. The last thing that you need to know is white balance is added to photo files. So this camera here can take JPEGs, like we all use, or RAW files. Now, a JPEG file is a compressed file, so it uses less space. And the way that it does that is the camera makes a lot of calculations in its little camera brain. And it decides what the white balance is or how you set the white balance, and it adds that information in. It throws out information, and so you get basically a packaged image. You can still adjust that white balance, by the way, in any simple photo editor, even Picasa. However, a RAW file is just a bag of data that has to be sort of developed in software like Lightroom or Photoshop. Or others too, of course. So when you have a RAW file, no white balance information is added to that data. So all those things that I told you about, you have to do in your post-production, in your photo application like Lightroom, for instance. And so what Lightroom will do is it will give you an approximate setting, and then you can fine-tune it down to what you want. Now, I'll tell you honestly, when you kind of follow the right steps, I've never had a problem taking a JPEG and not being able to correct it. Now, maybe under some extreme situations, let's say it was really yellow and I used shade setting, and I don't know what would happen. I still probably could correct it, but maybe not perfectly. But in most cases, you can correct a JPEG image even in post-production. So that's a very important topic, the topic of white balance. If you don't know how to do this in your camera, because every camera is different, download your manual. It's simple once you know how to do it, and it will make your pictures look so much better. If you get some time, please subscribe to my podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you like my channel, which has all sorts of different stuff on it, then please subscribe. And as always, too, have a great day.